It was the way she said it. Not loud, not cruel, just casual, like someone reminding you to pick up milk. You're free now, go find a life. That was the sentence. That's what broke me. She said it the morning after we buried my son. We hadn't even cleaned the reception dishes. His coat still hung by the door. His toothbrush was still in the holder. And she said that. I didn't respond. I don't think I could have. My mouth moved, but no words came out. I just sat there, still wearing the same black skirt from the service, clutching the folded flag they handed me, and watched her walk to the fridge, like we hadn't just buried the center of my universe. She poured herself oat milk. She yawned, then walked off humming. That sound, her humming, was what did it. My whole body folded inward like someone had pulled the bones from me. I collapsed against the table, trembling silent, and let myself cry the way I hadn't at the cemetery. Not around the guests. Not around the pastor. Not even around my sister. I saved it for that moment alone. My hands shaking. My son gone. And the woman he loved looking at me like I was a spare chair she no longer needed in the room. Let me know where you're listening from. I always love seeing how far these stories travel, and if this story speaks to you, share your thoughts below. Don't skip, because what happens at the end will surprise you more than the betrayal itself. My name's Anne. I'm 63 years old, and this isn't a story I ever wanted to tell. But some grief turns into rot if you keep it inside too long, and I've carried this one too far too quietly. I was never supposed to outlive my son. He was my only child. My miracle baby. After 5 years of failed fertility treatments and a miscarriage at 6 months, I remember the day the nurse said the words, "You're pregnant." I dropped the phone. Literally. I dropped it and screamed so loud the neighbors called to check on me. That boy, my Jack, he was my reason for breathing. My husband Michael passed when Jack was 7. Heart attack. Just like that. One moment he was in the yard fixing a broken gate, and the next, I was on the floor of the ER clutching his lifeless hand. Jack didn't cry much that day. He just looked at me and said, "It's okay, Mom. I'll take care of you now." He kept that promise every year after. Every hug. Every night he checked on me. Every card he handmade for every holiday. That boy didn't just love me, he protected me. Even as a child, he was old in his soul. When he was 10, he sold lemonade and brought me $5 and said, "Now you don't have to worry about bills, okay?" When he turned 16, he worked weekends to help with groceries. College. He got a scholarship so I wouldn't take out loans. He never said it, but I knew why. He was always watching me, always aware. I remember the first time he brought her home. Madeline. Everyone called her Mads. She was pretty. Big eyes, sharp jaw, voice like silk on glass. Jack was 26, a year out of grad school. He was glowing when he introduced her. "Mom, this is Mads. She's a photographer." She gave me a soft smile and said, "Hi, Anne. I've heard so much about you." And I believed it. I wanted to believe it. She asked questions, complimented my pie, laughed at the right places. My heart softened. I thought maybe this is the daughter I never had. They married 2 years later, a small ceremony by the lake. I cried during the vows, not because I was sad, but because I felt like we'd made it. That all the loss, all the pain, had led us here. A real family. For the first few years, it seemed good. Mads was busy with work, but Jack didn't mind. He supported her. He was proud of her. They got a little house in the city, 2 bedrooms. I visited once a week. Sometimes we'd cook together. Sometimes just tea and a movie. But then things shifted. Small things. Mads stopped showing up for Sunday dinners. When she did, she scrolled her phone through most of it. She stopped calling me Mom and started using just Anne. Jack told me not to take it personally. She's just stressed, he said. Work's been rough. So I let it slide. I told myself not to overthink. I'd lost so much I didn't want to lose more by speaking up too soon. And then 4 years ago, Jack got sick. Just a cough at first. Then fatigue. Then tests. Then cancer. Stage 4 lymphoma. We were shattered. But Jack smiled through it. I'll beat it, Mom, he said. We've been through worse. He didn't want to tell many people. Just kept working. Quiet. Brave. He asked me to move in for a bit. Help with meds. Keep him company during the bad days. Mads didn't protest, but she also didn't help. Not really. She worked late, traveled, went to events. She posted sunsets and brunches on Instagram while her husband lost 30 pounds in 3 months. One night, I found him crying in the hallway. He tried to hide it, said his bones ached. I sat beside him and held his head in my lap. He whispered, "She doesn't even sleep in the bed anymore." I didn't ask questions. I just stroked his hair and said, "I'm here, baby. I'm not going anywhere." The months blurred. Chemo, pain, hope, then worse news. By the time hospice came, he barely spoke, just squeezed my hand. He died on a rainy Thursday. I remember the sky looked bruised. I sat beside him till they took his body. Mads didn't cry. She was on the phone most of the evening. Told the nurse she needed to handle affairs. She picked the casket, chose the flower arrangements. Told the funeral director I'd be sitting in the second row, not the first. She said it with a smile. I didn't fight. I just sat quietly. Held Jack's watch in my palm the entire service. Then came the next morning. The humming, the sentence, the collapse. And now begins the story she never thought I'd tell. He was my world. My whole world. I don't say that for drama. I mean it. I don't think people understand what it's like to love one person so completely that their breath feels like yours. Jack wasn't just my son, he was my anchor. My only family after Michael passed. The only one who really knew me truly saw me. I remember lying in the hospital bed after giving birth holding this tiny, wrinkled creature with a puff of dark hair and big alert eyes. He didn't cry much, just stared at me like he knew something I didn't. That was Jack. Always watching, always understanding things faster than he should have. Those early years, it was just the two of us. We lived in a rented apartment above a diner. The walls were thin, the heater rattled, but Jack made everything feel like home. He loved puzzles, loved lining his toy cars up in perfect rows. I still have a scar on my shin from the time I tripped on one of them in the kitchen. He came running with a Band-Aid and whispered, "Don't cry, Mommy. You're strong." He was 4. When Michael died so suddenly, so brutally, I thought I'd never breathe right again. The house felt like a graveyard. Everyone brought casseroles and kind words, and then they all disappeared. But Jack stayed close. Even at 7, he sensed the weight in the air. I'd find him sitting by the front door after school, just waiting to see if I was okay. Some nights, I'd cry in the bathroom and pretend I was brushing my teeth. And every time I came out, Jack would be there on the couch, pretending to be asleep. He never said anything, just scooted closer when I sat down beside him. We grew up together in a way. He helped me as much as I helped him, and when I worked double shifts at the clinic, he made dinner. When I had to cancel vacations because of money, he smiled and said, "That just means we can plan a better one later." I didn't spoil him. I couldn't afford to. But I gave him everything I had, every ounce of my heart. When he got into university, I cried for 3 days. Not because I was sad, but because I was proud. My boy. The same boy who used to sleep with a flashlight under his pillow. Now a man. A scholar. He majored in environmental science. Said he wanted to make the world better. He always thought big like that. I remember the day he came home and told me he met someone. "She's different, Mom," he said. "She listens. She really gets me." I was cautious, of course. Every mother is. But when I met her, Madeline, I saw what he meant. She was charming. She had a softness to her voice, a way of making you feel like you were the only one in the room. I remember the first dinner we had together. She brought wine, complimented my cooking, asked me to tell childhood stories about Jack. I thought maybe this is it. Maybe I won't be alone in my old age. Jack was smitten. She made him laugh, and he made her feel secure, I could tell. He looked at her like she was sunlight. So, I opened my heart. Bought her a bracelet on their first Christmas. Called her sweetheart. Invited her to book club nights, even though she always politely declined. They married at a lake just outside Vermont. A warm, breezy day. Small gathering. I remember she wore a cream dress with lace sleeves, and Jack couldn't stop looking at her. I held back tears during the vows. I didn't want to steal their moment. But God, my heart felt full that day. They moved into a townhouse near the river. She had a studio for photography. He worked for a conservation nonprofit. They talked about starting a family. I crocheted a blanket just in case. For the first year, it was good. She called me Mom, sent me pictures from their trips. Sometimes she'd drop by with a coffee just to chat. But then, gradually, something changed. I noticed it first in her eyes. Distance. Disinterest. The way she stopped asking me questions. How she cut conversations short. Jack didn't notice, or if he did, he never said. He defended her when she missed holidays. Said she had deadlines. When she stopped coming to dinner altogether, he told me not to take it personally. But I did. How could I not? I started to feel like an afterthought, a shadow. Like once Jack was hers, I no longer had a seat at the table. It hurt, quietly. But I buried it, because I loved him more than I hated being pushed aside. Then came the diagnosis. It hit us like a freight train. He'd been coughing for months. Said it was allergies, fatigue said it was stress. I begged him to see a doctor. Finally he went. The results came back fast, too fast. Stage 4, aggressive. The world blurred. I moved in within a week, packed a bag and told my job I'd be on leave. I didn't ask Madeline. I didn't wait for an invitation. I knew Jack needed someone who wouldn't flinch. Someone who'd be there for the blood tests, the vomiting, the nights he couldn't breathe. She let me stay. She didn't argue, but she also didn't help. I cooked. I cleaned. I handled his meds. And Mads? She went to work, went to parties, took photos of flowers and posted them with captions about joy and growth, while her husband withered in the guest room because she didn't want to hear him groan in his sleep. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at him like he was already gone. Detached. Cold. I tried not to judge. Grief does strange things. But there were nights when I'd see her leave in heels, laughing on the phone, that something in me tightened. A thread pulling back, pulling tight. Jack noticed too, but he never said it out loud. Just small things. Once he whispered, "Promise me you'll stay even if she leaves." I said, "Always, baby. I'll never leave you." I meant it. Until the last breath. Until the rain fell outside, and I sat by his bed holding his hand, humming the lullaby I used to sing when he was 3. His fingers curled once, then stopped. And my heart broke clean in two. The funeral was a blur. I remember people hugging me, crying. I remember staring at his name carved in stone and thinking, this isn't real. He's just sleeping. I barely registered Madeline that day. Her dress, her dry eyes, the way she whispered something to a man who wasn't family and walked away from the casket before the service ended. But I didn't say a word. Not then. Not at the reception. Not that night. I waited. And then the next morning, she said it. "You're free now. Go find a life." And I did. Just not the one she expected. The first time I really felt it was the morning after she said it. "You're free now. Go find a life." Those words repeated in my head like a broken radio. I sat in the kitchen for hours after she left, staring at the place where Jack used to sit. His coffee mug still sat in the sink, a little chipped one with the faded print plant trees, not opinions. He loved that dumb mug, used it every morning like it was a ritual. And now the person who handed me that sentence had taken over his home, wore his shirts to bed, and talked about life going on like nothing had shattered. I told myself it was grief, that she was in shock, that people say stupid things when they don't know how to handle death. But deep down, I knew. I had known for a long time. There had been signs. I just hadn't wanted to see them. I started noticing them a few years back. The way she would talk about Jack when he wasn't in the room. The way her eyes rolled at his jokes. How she complained about his lack of ambition, even though he ran outreach programs and stayed up until 2 a.m., designing presentations for environmental grants. She called it Boy Scout energy, said it like it was an insult. But Jack never told me the truth. He kept her image polished. "She's just tired," he'd say. "She's working on a book." Or she's under pressure from her clients. I believed him because I wanted to. I wanted the fairy tale. I wanted to believe my son had found a partner who would honor him, not resent him for his softness. Then came the long silences. Jack would call me less. Our Sunday dinners went from every week to once a month, and when we did sit down together, he always seemed hesitant, guarded, like he was afraid of saying the wrong thing. I asked him once gently, "Are you okay, baby?" He smiled, but his eyes didn't. "I'm fine, Mom. You worry too much." Madeline stopped calling altogether. No check-ins, no updates. I was left guessing. I'd send her birthday cards, small gifts texts, half of which she never acknowledged. At one point, I asked Jack if she didn't like me anymore. He laughed tight and forced and said, "She's just distant with everyone, don't take it personally." But I did. Of course I did. And then when Jack got sick, it was like the last mask slid off her face. She didn't even try to pretend. I still remember the second hospital visit. Jack was curled up in a chair, too weak to stand. I was spoon-feeding him soup. She walked in wearing a blazer and heels, phone pressed to her ear, and waved at us like we were co-workers in a break room. "Just checking in," she said. She stayed 10 minutes, left before the doctor came. Didn't ask about the test results. When I got home that night, I opened a photo app out of habit, and there she was on a rooftop bar, holding a cocktail. Caption said, "Healing is a solo journey." The comments were full of heart emojis. "You're glowing. Strong queen. Your energy is untouchable." I stared at it for a long time, holding my phone like it was burning a hole through my hand. That's when I knew. She wasn't grieving. She wasn't confused. She was done. Done with Jack. Done with me. And she wasn't even pretending to be ashamed of it. After Jack passed, she barely spoke to me. She handled the arrangements like she was planning a corporate retreat. When the funeral director asked who would give the eulogy, she said, "We don't need one. Let's keep it short." I stepped in. Of course I did. I wrote it myself. Delivered it with my voice cracking and hands trembling. She stood beside me afterward, gave me a stiff side hug, then disappeared into a crowd of friends I'd never met. That night, I went to bed in Jack's room. His childhood blanket was still folded in the closet. I pulled it out and wrapped myself in it, breathing in the faint scent of cedar and laundry soap. I slept maybe an hour. In the morning, she walked into the kitchen in leggings and a hoodie, that didn't belong to Jack. She poured oat milk into a glass, took one sip, and said it. "You're free now. Go find a life." Then she looked at me like she expected gratitude, like I was a tenant whose lease had expired. I didn't speak, just nodded, but something inside me moved. Not a scream, not a sob, just something shifting beneath the surface. I stood up, poured myself coffee, and watched her back as she walked to the den. She had no idea what she'd done. Not yet. She thought she'd ended the story, but she'd only flipped the page. After she left the house that day, probably for brunch or yoga or whatever escape she favored, I went into Jack's closet. I sat on the floor for hours, just running my fingers along the sleeves of his coats, looking through old notebooks, photos, journals. He'd kept everything, receipts, postcards, even a concert ticket stub from our last night out together, just the two of us. And tucked inside one of the books was a note, just one line. "If anything happens, Mom, don't trust her." No signature, no explanation, just that. It hit me like a punch to the chest. He knew. He knew something he couldn't say out loud. And in that moment, all the doubts, all the suspicions, all the things I had excused or softened, they roared to life. She had betrayed him. Not just neglected, not just withdrawn, something darker. And I was going to find out what. But I wouldn't shout. I wouldn't storm. I wouldn't lower myself to her kind of mess. No, I would wait. Watch. And when the time came, I'd remind her who she'd underestimated. She had a smile I couldn't stand. The kind that didn't reach her eyes. The kind of smile people wear when they think they've won. That was the smile she gave me 2 nights after the funeral, when she came home late. I was in the living room, sitting with the lamp on, thumbing through one of Jack's old photo albums. She didn't see me at first. Walked in, humming. Her heels clicked against the wood floors. She tossed her coat over the banister and checked her reflection in the hallway mirror. Lipstick smudged. A small laugh escaped her lips, like she'd heard a joke I wasn't meant to know. When she finally noticed me sitting there, she jumped a little. "Oh," she said, all cool and breezy. "Didn't expect you to still be up." I didn't say a word, just looked at her. Her hair was curled. Her dress was tight, expensive. Perfume hung in the air like proof. She shifted slightly, her smile faltering for just a second. "I had dinner with some friends. Just needed to clear my head, you know?" I nodded. Slowly. She waited, expecting judgment maybe, but I gave her nothing. She left for her room a minute later, her boots tapping too loudly on the stairs. That was the first time I saw the cracks. Small hairline fractures in her act. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I began paying attention. I noticed how she changed her passcode, switched her calendar from paper to digital, started locking her bedroom door. She didn't know I was watching. She thought I was just a grieving old woman in slippers rattling around the house like an unwanted ghost. Let her believe that. I watched her phone habits. She'd smile at her screen when she thought I wasn't looking, bite her lip, turn it face down when I entered the room. One morning, she left her laptop open on the kitchen table while she showered. It wasn't locked. A folder titled Archived Shoots caught my eye. I opened it. There were dozens of photos, but not of flowers or weddings or clients. These were intimate, dimly lit hotel rooms, rooftop bars, bedrooms I didn't recognize, and he was in them. A man late 30s, bearded, always half out of frame. In some, she was kissing him. In others, smiling, lying in bed. Each file was time-stamped. Many were taken while Jack was in chemo. I sat back in the chair, my breath slow and steady. She hadn't just moved on. She'd been gone long before Jack left this world. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just closed the laptop and made myself a cup of tea. The next morning, I told her I was planning to stay for a while. She blinked. "Oh, I thought you might be heading back home soon," she said, stirring her overpriced yogurt. "This is home now," I replied softly. "Jack wanted me here." She didn't argue, but her hand tensed around the spoon. Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered. Not things, information. I watched, took notes, learned her routines. I found receipts hidden in the trash. Hotels, dinners for two. Even a receipt from a jewelry store. Not the one where Jack got her ring. That particular one was dated 3 weeks before his death. She was buying new jewelry while I was changing his feeding tubes, while he cried in the middle of the night from pain that made his spine feel like glass. That was the moment I decided, not to hurt her, not to destroy her, but to reclaim something. Something she never thought I'd reach for. Power. She assumed Jack left everything to her. She never asked, never checked. Probably didn't even care. But Jack and we had conversations. Real ones. Quiet ones. And he was smarter than she ever gave him credit for. I remembered one particular night, maybe a month before he passed. He was in pain, couldn't sleep. I sat with him, held his hand. He said, "Mom, if anything happens, promise me you won't let her ruin everything." I nodded, holding back tears. "She's not who you think she is," he added. I tried. I really tried. But she doesn't love me anymore. Maybe she never did. I whispered, "I know, baby." He said, "I'm changing my will. You'll be the executor. I already spoke to the lawyer. If I don't get better, I want you to have control. Don't tell her. She'll make it worse." He died before he could finalize everything. But he'd already updated the trust. That was what she didn't know. And I wasn't about to tell her. Not yet. I booked an appointment with Jack's lawyer under my name. A man named Reed Olderkind, sharp as glass. He'd handled Jack's estate for years. "I was wondering when you'd come," he said, offering me coffee. He confirmed it all. Jack had moved the assets, transferred everything into a living trust with me as trustee. The house, his accounts, even his retirement funds. Madeline was named in the original will, but not the trust. She'd get nothing unless I signed it over. Reed smiled. "She has no idea, does she?" "Not yet," I said, "but I want to keep it that way, for now." He nodded. "Tell me what you want to do." And I did, in detail. She thought I'd leave quietly, that I'd vanish, dissolve into the grief like some grieving relic. But she never understood the kind of woman I was. The kind who survives, the kind who waits. And when the time comes, strikes with precision. I wasn't ready to move just yet. I needed her to feel comfortable, needed her to drop her guard. So I made tea, washed dishes, asked polite questions about her work. I even complimented her on a new dress. And all the while, I watched. Every smile, every message, every lie. Because betrayal isn't just about what someone does to you. It's about what they think you'll never do back. The rain came hard that Thursday night. I was in Jack's room sorting through old boxes when I heard her heels on the stairs. She never walked softly, never tiptoed. Always loud, like she needed the world to know she was there. She laughed into her phone as she passed the room. I didn't turn to look. I didn't have to. I already knew who she was talking to. For 3 weeks now, I'd kept my pace deliberate. Let her believe she'd gotten away with everything. I was quiet, helpful, harmless. The kind of woman people glance past in elevators and forget at parties. But inside, I was moving pieces slowly, methodically. The lawyer knew my plan. The financial advisor Jack had used confirmed the transfer of funds. All of it now resided under my authority. Madeline didn't realize how deeply her name had been removed from everything that mattered. But that night, as I heard her door shut and the soft buzz of music through the wall, I realized it was time. She had no idea what I was about to do. The next morning, I baked banana bread. That was Jack's favorite. She came down in a silk robe, her hair tied loosely. She looked relaxed, comfortable. "Morning," she said, not even glancing my way. "Morning," I said, laying the bread out on a tray. "Want a slice?" She nodded, picked at the edge with a fork. "Smells good." I watched her, calm, patient. She leaned back and said, "So, any thoughts on what your next step is?" After all this, I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Yes." She blinked. "Yeah, I think I'll stay right here for now." A small pause. Then that smile again, the condescending one. "I just thought maybe you'd want to travel, see some friends, start fresh." I tilted my head slightly. Fresh is overrated. She didn't respond, just looked at her phone. That afternoon, I sent the first message. Anonymous, of course. A tip to her workplace. Nothing loud, just enough to stir curiosity. I followed it up with a quiet request to an old friend of Jack's who worked in HR consulting. A name drop here, a photo there. That same night, I filed the first request with the bank to separate all remaining joint accounts. Her name would flag red the next time she tried to make a transaction. She wouldn't find out yet, not today. But the cracks had started. By the following week, her boyfriend stopped coming around. I knew his name, Liam. I'd seen the texts, heard the late-night whispers. I even recognized his cologne once in the laundry room. But Liam was married. That was his mistake. I sent her a letter. No return address. One photo. Her and Liam, from the hotel. Taken by me. She never knew I was there. I had worn a scarf, sunglasses, walked slowly. No one notices old women in scarves. I heard her scream from the kitchen when she opened the envelope. Then came the slamming of drawers, frantic phone calls. The sound of something breaking upstairs. I stirred my tea and hummed to myself. Later, she cornered me in the hallway. "Did you see anyone near the mailbox?" I shook my head. "No, dear." Why she looked me over like she didn't trust the question. "Someone's messing with me." I offered a gentle smile. "I'm sure it's nothing." The days after that, she grew erratic, jumpy, paranoid. I found her crying in the bathroom once door cracked open just enough. She didn't hear me walk by, didn't hear me pause. She was unraveling, and I was blooming. I met again with Reed. We reviewed the final trust activation. Everything was ready. All that remained was the house. She thought she still owned half. She didn't. Jack had quietly signed over his portion 2 months before he died. I held the documents. Notarized, filed, legal. All I had to do was file the title transfer. And then she'd be a tenant. In my home. I waited until she left one evening, dressed too nicely, makeup too perfect. I knew she was trying to reclaim control. Pretend she hadn't noticed the shift. While she was gone, I opened her room. It took all of 5 minutes. Her passwords weren't clever. Her browser history wasn't deleted. Emails, messages, financial spreadsheets, even drafts of emails to Liam pleading, begging him not to ghost her. I screenshotted everything, stored it on a private drive. Not to use against her yet, but just in case. By the time she came home drunk and flustered, I had already washed the sheets and reset the lock. She walked past me without a word, didn't even try to look strong anymore. And in that silence, I knew. I'd won. But I wasn't finished. The final piece came in the form of a charity event she'd been promoting online. A photography exhibit. Big names, press coverage. She was supposed to be one of the featured artists. I submitted the photos anonymously. The hotel pictures, the time-stamped logs. The dates matched Jack's chemo calendar. I didn't send them to ruin her career. I sent them so she could no longer lie. 2 days later, The gallery rescinded her invite, quietly, professionally, but firmly. She came home that night white as a sheet. "I think someone's stalking me," she said to me out of nowhere. I looked up from my knitting. "Oh, I'm serious. Someone's sending things. Someone's ruining my life." I stood slowly, walked over, looked her in the eye. "Maybe they know something you don't want them to." Her breath caught. "What are you saying?" "Nothing, dear. Just things have a way of surfacing." She stared at me confused, angry, scared, and then she walked away. That was the last time she tried to act like this house was hers. She'd lost control, and she knew it, but the confrontation, that was still to come. And I had every word of it planned. It was the voicemail that told me she was cracking. Left at 2:14 a.m. Her voice was quiet, almost broken. "I don't know what's happening. Everything's falling apart. I think someone's trying to destroy me." She sniffled, paused, then added, "If it's you, if you're doing this, I just want to talk." Then the beep. She never said my name, never asked for forgiveness, just suspicion. Fear. That was the first time I knew she was truly scared. And that was good. She should have been. I waited until morning, made coffee, sat at the breakfast nook with Jack's old thermos. She came down late wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. Her shoulders slumped, makeup smudged. She didn't say a word at first. Just poured herself water and drank it like it might fix everything. Then softly, "Have you noticed anything strange?" Around the house, I took a sip of coffee. Strange like missing mail, people watching from outside. I think someone might be trying to mess with me." I set the cup down. "Who would do such a thing?" She looked at me searching. "I don't know. Some jealous ex, some crazy person from the gallery scene. People are vicious." I nodded, feigning sympathy. "People can be." She didn't say anything else, just sat down across from me and stared out the window. She didn't know yet about the accounts, that her name had been flagged, that she'd be denied access the next time she tried to use Jack's old debit card. But she would. By Thursday, her job had officially suspended her. She got the email while we were both in the living room. I heard her breath catch, then the quiet click of her laptop closing. That night, she got drunk. Again. But not the social kind of drunk, the kind that slurs, that cries, that rants. I was in the laundry room when I heard her yelling into the phone. "You don't get to walk away from me, Liam. I gave up everything for you." A pause. A strangled noise. "You think she's better than me? She's 62 and wears Walmart pajamas." I smiled at that. I wasn't even wearing pajamas, just Jack's hoodie and old jeans. The next morning, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, head in her hands. "I can't live like this," she said. "Something's wrong. Everything's wrong." I set down my cup and folded my hands. "Maybe you should take a break. Travel. Find a life." She flinched, and I knew. She remembered. She looked up at me, eyes wide, and for the first time since Jack died, she saw me. Really saw me. Not the grieving mother. Not the harmless guest. The woman she underestimated. "You're doing this," she whispered. I tilted my head slightly. "Doing what? All of it? The emails? The rumors? The exhibit? The accounts? The..." She stopped. "You're trying to ruin me." "I think you're giving me too much credit, dear," I said gently. She stood abruptly. "I gave you a place to stay? I let you?" "No," I said, my voice firm. "Jack gave me a place to stay. This house is his, was his. And now," I reached into my sweater pocket, pulled out a folded sheet. "Now it's mine." She hesitated, took the paper, scanned it. Deed transfer, trust documents, legal signatures. She looked up pale. This, this can't be real. It's very real, I said. Jack made sure of it, months before he died. She staggered back. No, he would have told me. He did. I cut in. Just not you. Her lip trembled. I was his wife, and I was his mother, I said. The one who stayed, the one who held his hand through every treatment, the one who carried him before you ever knew his name. She fell into the chair behind her like her legs gave out. I gave up everything for him, she whispered. I raised an eyebrow. No, you gave up on him. Silence. Heavy. Then for the first time since Jack's diagnosis, she cried in front of me. Not crocodile tears, not manipulation. Real sobbing. Broken. I didn't know how to handle it, she said between gasps. I was drowning. I didn't mean to be so cold. I just wanted to escape. Everything felt like a tomb. I didn't know how to breathe in that house anymore. I listened. Quiet. You think I didn't love him? She asked. I did. I ran. I know I said. I saw it. Every day. She wiped her face with her sleeve. So what now? You gonna kick me out? I haven't decided yet, I said. But you'll leave eventually, whether it's this week or next month. Jack's home won't be your playground anymore. Her face crumpled. She stood, walked slowly to the stairs. That night, she didn't eat, didn't come down, didn't turn on a single light, and I sat in the living room, knitting quietly, the soft clack of needles echoing like a lullaby. The house felt different, lighter, like the grief had made space for something else. Justice, maybe, or peace. But I wasn't done. Not until every trace of her power was gone. Not until I fulfilled the promise I made to my son. Don't let her win. He'd whispered that with his last breath. And I would keep it until the very end. She didn't come out of her room for 3 days. Not once. I'd hear her pacing, sometimes crying, once throwing something glass, I think. It shattered against the wall, and then silence. I let her be. I didn't check in. I didn't knock. I'd done enough of that during Jack's illness, only to be met with fake smiles and colder stares. This time she could sit in the isolation she'd built for herself. But on the 4th day, she came down. No makeup, eyes swollen, hair unbrushed. She looked like a stranger. The woman who had once floated through rooms like she was walking a red carpet was gone. She stood in the doorway of the kitchen and just stared at me. I didn't move. I was buttering toast. I kept buttering it. Finally, she spoke. Can we talk? I paused, placed the knife down, turned to her. I'm listening. She moved like she was wading through mud, slow and dragging, and sat across from me. Her fingers twisted together, her voice barely audible. I think I lost myself. I didn't answer. She looked down at her hands. When Jack got sick, I couldn't look at him. Not because I didn't love him, but because I did. Watching him fade, it felt like drowning, and I didn't know how to swim. Her voice cracked. I know I was cold. I know I abandoned him. And you. I knew it even while I was doing it, but I told myself I'd deal with it later. When it was over? When I wasn't so afraid? You were afraid, I asked. Yes. I folded my hands. And Jack. Her mouth twitched. I don't think he ever stopped believing I'd come back around. Even in the end. He looked at me like I was worth loving. He was always like that, I said. She nodded. You loved him better than anyone else ever could. I felt something twist inside me. He loved you more than anyone else ever would, I said. She wiped her eyes. I didn't expect you to forgive me. I wouldn't. If I were you, I didn't move, didn't speak. I wanted to say it. I'm sorry. I know it's not enough. But I wanted you to hear it. The words hung there. and for a moment, the room went still. I studied her. The woman I had come to hate. The woman I had punished silently, precisely, with no warning. The woman who once told me, "You're free now. Go find a life," like I was dead weight to be shrugged off. And now, here she was, crumbling. Not because I had screamed at her, not because I had made a scene, but because I had let the truth speak for itself. I stood, took my toast, walked to the sink, then turned back and said, "He asked me not to let you in. That's what I've been doing." She nodded slowly. "You did. You won." I walked toward the stairs, but before I reached the first step, I turned again. "You didn't just lose Jack Madeline. You lost every chance he gave you to be a better person. And now all you've got left is what you didn't destroy." She flinched. Her voice came barely above a whisper. "And what's that me?" I climbed the stairs one slow step at a time. She didn't follow. Later that night, I heard her moving things. Drawers, zippers, closet doors. She was packing. I sat on Jack's bed, folded the same sweatshirt I'd folded a dozen times, and waited for the quiet. In the morning, she was gone. Left a note. No goodbye. Just, "I'm sorry. Thank you for not screaming. You didn't need to. I heard you anyway." That was it. I stood in the hallway holding the note like it was a confession, like it carried the last breath of a storm that had finally passed. Then I made breakfast. Alone. For the first time in what felt like years, the house was mine again. But it wasn't just a house anymore. It was memory. It was battlefield. It was sanctuary. And I knew what I had to do next. Closure doesn't come with apologies. It comes with action. So I went into the study, pulled out the old filing box, and started writing the letter Jack had always meant to leave. To himself. To her. To me. The letter started with his name. I wrote it at the top like a prayer. Jack William Myers. Just seeing it in ink made my chest tighten. I hadn't spoken it aloud in weeks. People avoid names after death like saying them might bring the weight crashing back down. But I needed to write it. Needed to feel like I was speaking to him directly. It wasn't a dramatic letter. Not some scathing indictment of Madeline. I didn't need to relive all that. No, it was something else. A record. A quiet reckoning. I wrote about the silence in the house now. How different it felt, and yet how deeply his presence still lingered. His shirts still hung in the closet like they were waiting to be worn. His books still lined the shelf in perfect alphabetical order. I dusted around them like I used to when he was little, always careful not to misplace a single one. I told him about the birds nesting outside the kitchen window, how every morning they chirped like he used to hum when he cooked eggs. I told him the garden was overgrown, but I'd get to it, that I'd started reading again his old environmental journals just to feel him near. And then I told him the truth, that she was gone, that I'd done what he asked. I didn't describe it in detail. I didn't need to. I simply wrote, "She left." Not in pain, but in shame. And I didn't scream. I didn't strike. I just held the truth up to her face like a mirror. And I told him something else. Something I hadn't even told myself yet. That I missed her. Not Madeline, the woman who betrayed him. But the idea of her. The daughter-in-law I thought I had. The family I thought we'd built. I missed the fantasy. The dinners I'd planned in my head. The Christmas mornings I thought I'd share with grandkids. The long walks and shared stories. I wrote, "It wasn't just you I lost, Jack. It was the life I thought I was going to live with you. It was everything that came after you." When I finished the letter, I folded it neatly, tucked it into the envelope, and placed it inside the cedar box that held his watch, his hospital wristband, and the first drawing he ever gave me a crayon scribble of the two of us standing under a crooked sun. I locked the box, set it back on the shelf. Then I opened the windows and let the wind in. Later that day, I went outside for the first time in weeks. I trimmed the hedges, pulled weeds from the flower beds, planted new seeds, sunflowers, because Jack used to say they looked like they were smiling at the sky. The sun was warm on my back. I worked until my arms ached and my legs trembled. Then I sat on the porch and listened. No yelling, no slammed doors, no high heels echoing down the hall. Just birds, wind, the sound of peace returning home. The next morning, I got a phone call. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. But something in me said, "Pick up." "Ann Myers," a woman asked. "Yes. This is Susan Cartwright. I work at Silver Oak Hospice. I helped care for your son Jack. I'm not sure if you remember me?" I did. She was the nurse who brought him the blanket with the blue trim. He smiled every time she entered the room. "I'm calling because I found something," she said. I wasn't sure if I should reach out, but I felt like maybe you'd want it. She told me there'd been a note, a small one, folded and hidden under the drawer of his bedside table. She hadn't seen it until she went back to help clean the room. It was addressed to me. I drove there the next day. She met me in the lobby with soft eyes and warm hands, gave me the note in a plain envelope. It was short. His handwriting. Messy week, but still his. "Mom, if you're reading this, I didn't get better. I'm sorry. I wanted to stay. I really did. But I need you to know I see you. I see how hard you're fighting to hold me together. I see how you keep loving even when it hurts. I know you see her now. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner, but I was ashamed. Don't carry hate for her. She doesn't know how to love right, and that's not your fault. Carry love. Just carry it forward. That's how you win. Love, Jack." I cried harder than I had since the funeral. Not because of the pain, but because of the clarity. He had known, and he had forgiven, even before he died. He hadn't asked me to destroy her. He'd asked me to protect him. And I had, but he didn't want me to rot with the anger. He wanted me to keep the love. I sat in my car for an hour with the note in my lap, reading it again and again. When I finally drove home, the sky was orange. A soft sunset. I walked into the house and didn't feel haunted anymore. I opened all the windows, lit a candle, made myself soup, and I wrote a second letter. This one, to Madeline. "You apologized. I heard it, and I believe you meant it. I don't know what your future holds, but mine no longer includes hatred. That doesn't mean I forgive, but it means I'm not keeping you inside me anymore. I'm letting go. You're not mine to punish anymore. You're just someone I used to know." I didn't send it, didn't need to, but I felt lighter having written it. Some revenge is loud. Mine was quiet, precise, and complete. Now I was ready to move on, not to forget, but to live again. A month after she left, I found her sweater in the back of the coat closet. It was beige soft, barely worn. I remember the day she bought it. Jack teased her about spending too much on something that looks like oatmeal, and she swatted him playfully laughing. I held it for a moment, then laid it over the banister. I didn't throw it away. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some things aren't meant to be destroyed. Just left behind. The house had changed, not just in silence, but in energy. I opened curtains I used to keep drawn, rearranged the living room the way Jack liked his reading chair angled to catch the morning sun. I started cooking again, just for me. Soups, bread, stews that filled the air with warmth instead of grief. But one afternoon, while sorting through the attic, I found something I hadn't expected. A locked file box with Jack's handwriting on the label mads. Personal. I don't know why I hadn't noticed it before. Maybe I wasn't ready to. But now, I was. I cracked it open and found notebooks, journals, a few printed emails, receipts, notes scribbled in the margins of manila folders. Jack had been documenting things, quietly, thoughtfully. He had seen everything. He hadn't been blind or naive. There were entries she left again tonight. Said it was work, but she doesn't come home until after midnight. I'm too tired to ask. I saw her texting someone. I know that look. It's the same one she used to give me before we fell in love. Now she saves it for her phone. Mom knows. She doesn't say it, but she sees it too. Sometimes I think dying would be easier than living with the way she looks at me. I closed the journal gently, holding it like it might fall apart in my hands. My son hadn't just suffered through cancer, he'd suffered through abandonment. And he had carried it quietly with dignity, because that's who he was. The box also contained a draft of his trust revision. The final one, the one Reed had filed. His notes were meticulous. Names, percentages, statements of intention, and at the bottom, in bold, Madeline is not to control anything. Not because I hate her, but because I no longer trust her to love anything she didn't create herself. I took a breath. He hadn't been cruel, not even in death. He had just been sure. I placed everything back inside, locked the box again, and slid it under my bed. Not as evidence, as testimony. Jack had done the hard part. He'd seen the truth, chosen what to protect, left the path behind him lit for me to follow. A few days later, I got a letter. Handwritten, no return address, but I knew the handwriting instantly. Madeline. Inside were 5 lines. I left the sweater on purpose. It was always more yours than mine. I saw the garden. You're doing a good job. I'm sorry for the way I said goodbye. No signature. I sat with that note for a long time. Not angry. Not even surprised. She had changed, maybe just a little, but enough to know the difference between running and returning. Still, I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. A week later, I donated most of her clothes. Except the sweater. I folded it, placed it in Jack's memory chest beside his watch. Not because I wanted to preserve her, but because it belonged to that chapter. To him. To all of it. Life after loss isn't about forgetting. It's about absorbing, reorganizing. I started volunteering at a hospice center. The same one that cared for Jack. Susan, the nurse who gave me the note, introduced me to everyone like I was family. And maybe in a way I was. I sat with patients who didn't have visitors, read to them, brought them soup, held their hands when they cried. One man, Frank, told me, "You have kind eyes." I thanked him, but inside, I knew they hadn't always been that way. They were sharpened by grief, smoothed by revenge, weathered by love. One afternoon, after I finished reading to a woman named Joyce, I stepped outside and felt the wind roll through the trees. It smelled like lavender. The sun hit my face just right, and for the first time in over a year, I felt Jack beside me. Not as a memory, not as a ghost, but as presence. I whispered, "We're okay now," and I meant it. Later that week, I updated the house deed again. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted it recorded that everything Madeline once assumed was hers had passed through her and survived. Jack's home was no longer a monument to pain. It was a place of peace, of memory, of rebirth. That night, I sat in the garden with a candle lit beside me and wrote one last entry in my own journal. You were right, Jack. Carrying love is harder than hate. But it's the only thing that lasts. She didn't win, but I didn't lose either. We both walked away with what we earned. And you, my beautiful boy, you live in every corner of this place. In the light, in the silence, in the forgiveness I never thought I'd find. It was a Tuesday morning when the final document arrived. A thick envelope stamped with the county seal title confirmation. The deed now solely in my name. The final thread cut. I stood there in the doorway with the paper in my hands and stared out over the front yard. The hydrangeas were starting to bloom. Jack planted them himself 4 years ago on his birthday when I teased him about spending too much time digging in the dirt. He had laughed, said I want something that stays rooted no matter what, and they did. I walked inside, set the document on the kitchen table, and made myself coffee. No ceremony, no fanfare, just a soft sense of completion. The house was mine, not through force or fury, but through patience, through intention, and through Jack's quiet foresight. Later that day, I drove to the lawyer's office to sign the last few forms. Reed greeted me with a smile and that same familiar calm. I have to admit, he said I've never seen someone reclaim a legacy quite like this. I didn't reclaim it, I said. I honored it. He nodded. She never even contested. Because she knew, I replied. Deep down, she always knew. Reed handed me a copy of the final trust breakdown assets property, everything Jack had moved under my stewardship. You're in full control now. Legally, financially, everything. I left his office with a folder tucked under my arm and a sense of balance I hadn't felt in years. Not power, not revenge, just closure. I didn't celebrate, I didn't call anyone, I simply drove to the cemetery. Jack's grave sat under the old elm tree, the grass neatly trimmed, the headstone etched with clean lines. I brought the sunflowers he loved, arranged them in the vase. I stood there a long time, just breathing. The wind carried the scent of summer soil and cut grass. I knelt, touched the stone, and whispered, "She's gone. You were right about everything." I could almost hear him say, "I know, Mom." I pulled the folded deed from my purse, pressed it to the granite, and said, "This isn't about ownership, it's about promise." And then, "We're okay. You can rest now." After I left, I didn't cry. Not that day. I just felt clean, emptied of rage, filled with something else, something warmer. When I got home, I opened the windows wide, let air flow through every room. I sat in the study and looked at the old photo of Jack as a boy, missing a front tooth, holding a garden trowel. Dirt smudged across his cheek. That night, I lit a single candle and wrote a final letter. This one was for me, dear Anne. You didn't let her win. You didn't break. You didn't lower yourself to her level. You stayed silent when it mattered, and you spoke when it counted. You used your strength quietly. You held the truth like a sword hidden in lace. You didn't scream. You didn't burn anything down. You simply turned the light on. You buried your son, but you didn't bury yourself. You lost your future as you imagined it, but you reclaimed your present. You did not crumble. You stood tall. You survived. I folded the letter, tucked it into my journal, and closed the cover. The next morning, I visited the garden again. The sunflowers had opened yellow and tall, reaching for the sky like they had nothing left to fear. And I smiled. The doorbell rang later that afternoon. A delivery. No sender listed. Inside was a small box. No note. Just a single object. The pearl earring Madeline had lost during Jack's first hospital visit. I remembered it. I'd found it in the hallway once, but she'd claimed it had no value. She never wore it again. And yet, here it was. She'd sent it back. Not with apology, but with understanding. She knew what it meant. that I had never needed to shout to win. I just needed to hold the line, and in the end, she had nothing left to take. Everything she'd tried to possess was never truly hers. Jack, the house, even the silence. It had all belonged to me, because I never let go, and I never let her write the ending. I stood in the doorway holding the earring, and for the first time, I laughed. Not loud, just soft. A quiet release, like exhaling after holding your breath for too many years. That night, I tucked the earring into the cedar box beside the sweater and the letters. I wasn't erasing the past, I was preserving it. Not for her, not even for Jack, but for me. So I would never forget what I overcame, and how I did it, with silence, with patience, with one signature. She thought I was gone, that once she vanished, once the last bag was packed, and her name was cut from the documents, I'd retreat like some forgotten shadow. She didn't understand me, never did. She assumed her departure marked the end of the story. But endings don't come with silence. They come with awareness, with knowing exactly what was lost and what never belonged in the first place. It started small. A few weeks after she left, I saw her name appear online. A new photography website. Clean, modern, curated with the same kind of soft pastels she always loved. But something was different. She'd stripped it of anything personal. No bios, no smiling headshots. Just images, landscapes, buildings. Nothing of people. No more portraits of lovers laughing on park benches. No children chasing bubbles in golden hour light. She was erasing emotion from her work, hiding. I didn't feel satisfaction. Not really. Just confirmation. She had lost more than comfort. She'd lost her narrative. The version of herself that lived off admiration, off curated glimpses of warmth and charm, it was gone. And in its place was someone stiff, cold, careful. I got an email not long after. Not from her. From a woman I didn't know. Subject line: "You don't know me, but I think I know you." Inside: "My name is Jenna. I'm a writer based in New York. I used to work with Madeline. She mentioned you once during a particularly vulnerable moment. Said you taught her more about consequence than anyone ever had." I didn't understand it then. But I do now. She's not well. She doesn't say it out loud, but I can see it. She left behind a storm, and now she walks like the winds still chasing her. I don't know what happened between you. I don't need to. But I just wanted you to know. You left a mark, the kind that doesn't bruise but burns into the soul slowly. I think in her own twisted way she respects you now. Fears you, maybe, but respects you. I didn't reply. Didn't need to. I just closed the laptop and looked out the window at the bird feeder Jack installed years ago. 2 cardinals danced between the branches, red against green, and I felt it again, that gentle warmth of being rooted, not tethered by pain, but held by purpose. I went back into Jack's room that evening, not to cry, just to sit, to remember him as more than the boy who died, but the man who planned, who loved with clarity. I picked up one of his books, an old hardcover on conservation. Inside, a handwritten note. One I must have missed before. "Mom, keep this for me. I think I'll need it later. If I don't, it's yours." Even in passing, he trusted me with the future. He wasn't just my son. He was my legacy. And the choices I made for him, the quiet vengeance, the steady dismantling of Madeline's illusion, it was never about revenge. It was about preservation. Preserving dignity. Preserving truth. I got a call the next day from a local center downtown. They were looking for volunteers to lead a memoir writing group. Someone had read my hospice stories, word must have spread. I said yes. I wasn't done speaking. My voice had been quiet for years. Now it could be steady, strong. I started showing up twice a week, 10 people in a circle, all with different griefs, different losses. But every single one of them held something sacred, a story. The first day I stood in front of them and said, "Sometimes the hardest thing is not what we survive, but what we learn to live with after." And they listened. They wrote. And one woman, after the third session, pulled me aside. "You remind me of someone who fought for herself. Not with fists, but with facts. With truth." I smiled. That's what Jack taught me. The power of quiet things. Madeline never showed up again. Never tried to reclaim the house. Never asked for her things. But I kept one small package of her belongings in the attic. A thin photo album. One she must have tucked away years ago. Inside a picture of her and Jack on their wedding day. She was smiling, really smiling. He was looking at her like she was the whole sun. I didn't tear it up. Didn't toss it. Just placed it on a shelf and shut the lid. Because that moment, whatever came after, had been real. Even if only for a while. And sometimes that's enough. Truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to last. And this house, this quiet sunflower-draped home, was full of truth now. Not because I conquered her, but because I never let her conquer me. The night before Jack passed, I sat beside his bed and watched his chest rise and fall in shallow rhythms. The room was dim, lit only by the small lamp he liked by the window. His skin was pale, thinner than paper, but his eyes were alert. He hadn't spoken much that day. The pain medication was strong. But then, just as I started to drift off in the chair, I felt his fingers brush mine. "Mom," he whispered. I leaned in close. "I'm here, baby." He smiled. Barely. His lips cracked when he did. "I've been thinking about what he stared at the ceiling like it held a different sky than I could see. About how you always told me, love doesn't mean staying when it's easy. It means choosing someone even when they're sinking." I nodded slowly. "And you chose her." He looked at me then. Eyes wet, not from tears, but from truth. "Yeah, I did. I thought I could be her anchor. Thought if I held on long enough she'd come back around. And she didn't." "No." His voice cracked. "She left before my body did." I swallowed hard, holding back the sob that rose to my throat. "But you didn't," he whispered. "You stayed, even when it got ugly. Even when I hated myself. Even when I gave up." I brushed his hair back just like I did when he was a little boy. "I never gave up on you." He turned his face toward me, and for the last time in his life, he said the words that had echoed through every year of his existence. "Thank you, Mom." That was the last thing he ever said. He slipped away before morning. I don't remember screaming, or falling, or any of the things people expect when death enters a room. I remember the stillness, the kind that wraps around your bones and doesn't let go. I remember holding his hand long after it had gone cold. And I remember one clear thought, one hard, unwavering truth. I would not let her rewrite him. She had tried, quietly, subtly, with fake smiles at the funeral, with casual remarks about how Jack would want us to move on. She thought she could shape the memory of him into something soft, distant. But Jack was fire, even in the end. And I was his flame keeper. That's what this all had been about. Not revenge, not punishment, not even justice. It had been about memory, about protecting the story from being bent into something comfortable for her. I opened my journal again that night, wrote in thick, deliberate strokes he died loved, completely, by me, by the people who truly knew him. He died knowing who he was, and that is everything. The next day, I received a package, no name, just a white box. Inside, was a single photo. Jack and I at the lake 3 months before his diagnosis. I was laughing. He had one arm around my shoulders and the other lifting an ice cream cone in mock triumph. On the back, written in neat pen, "This is how I want to remember him too." Madeline. I held the photo for a long time. I didn't feel anger. Not anymore. Just something like resolution. Maybe that was the last thread, the final tether between us. Maybe she understood now. That memory can be mercy, or a sentence, depending on how you live. That evening, I placed the photo in a frame and set it by the window. Not because I forgave her, but because Jack would have wanted me to see the whole picture, even the parts that hurt. I sat by the garden wine in hand and let the wind rustle the sunflowers. I whispered his name. Once. Just once. And it felt like saying goodbye. Not to him, but to the part of me that had needed to hold on to the fire. I didn't need it anymore. I had the light now, in every corner of the house, in the garden he planted, in the woman I had become. It was nearly a year to the day. The air smelled like earth and cut grass. I stood in the garden, barefoot toes deep in the soil Jack once turned with his own hands. The sunflowers were taller than ever, strong, bold, like they'd never known frost. I looked around at the house, my house, not as a possession, but as something I had reclaimed room by room, inch by inch. The curtains were drawn open. The books on the shelf were in order. The air smelled like lemon oil and lavender. No ghosts, no echoes, just the quiet hum of peace. I thought about how far I'd come. From the day she said those words, "You're free now, go find a life," to now, where freedom didn't feel like exile. It felt like space, breathable space. I sat on the porch swing with my journal in my lap, the last page blank. A full book of every thought, every wound, every little plan I had hidden behind a still face. I flipped through it, slowly. I had written myself through every phase of grief, every detail of her betrayal, every careful step of her undoing. I had turned silence into strategy, hurt into clarity, and here I was, not bitter, not empty, just whole. A car passed on the street slowly. A couple walking a dog waved as they went by. I waved back, smiling. They didn't know who I had been a year ago. They just knew me as the kind woman with the garden, the one who offered fresh herbs to the neighbors. Later that afternoon, I pulled out a small wooden box from the closet. Jack's memory box. His watch. His letter. A photo of us from the state fair. A piece of paper I hadn't touched in months, his trust agreement. I looked at it for a long while, then folded it carefully and tucked it behind the photo. It didn't matter anymore. Power had done what it needed to do. Now it was time to set it down. I walked into his room, still preserved, still sacred, and opened the window. The breeze lifted the curtains like hands. I closed my eyes and let it pass over my face. I whispered again, "We're okay now." And I knew he heard me. That night, I took out my best notebook, a new one, leather-bound, clean pages, no bitterness inside it, just possibility. On the first page I wrote, "This is not about grief. This is about what remains after the fire has burned through." Then I wrote my name, Ann Myers. Just me. Not a mother in mourning, not a woman abandoned, not a quiet force waiting in shadows. Just a woman who had survived all of it and still had room left to grow. I closed the book and stood by the window watching the garden dance in the wind. A bird landed on the windowsill, looked at me, then flew off. I smiled. Not everything needs to stay. Some things are meant to visit, to remind us. I spent the next day boxing up the rest of Madeline's things. Not out of anger, just necessity. Her story didn't live here anymore. I dropped the box off at a donation center. Didn't linger. didn't leave a note, just walked out and never looked back. She hadn't contacted me again. But I knew she'd received the message. Not the letters, not the earring, the silence, the fact that I didn't chase her, didn't need the last word. She knew what I'd done, and she knew I'd never say it out loud. That was the real consequence. Her downfall wasn't loud, it was quiet, isolating, like walking through a house that no longer recognizes you. I had taken everything from her with one signature. But more than that, I had taken back myself. A few weeks later, I sat by the fireplace with a friend from the memoir group. We sipped tea, shared stories. She looked around the living room and said, "This place feels like a painting, like someone cared for every detail." I smiled. It wasn't always like this. She nodded. Takes time to turn a wound into a wall that holds you up. I closed my eyes for a second, breathed in the scent of lemon balm and books. "It does," I said, "but it's worth it." Before she left, she asked if I'd be willing to share my story with a larger audience. A podcast? A memoir? Something that would help others who were too tired to fight. I didn't answer right away, but later that night, I sat down at my desk, opened a blank document, and typed the title. When my son passed, my daughter-in-law said, "You're free now, go find a life." And I did. Just not the one she expected.